Hello everyone, so welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing the third part, which is actually user interaction with the stories through likes and comments. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So this is what I'm going to be covering for today. So what we did previously, I would say in the other sections, the first was authentication and authorization part. The second one was actually storage and content deliveries. For storage, it was S3, and then for content delivery, I used CloudFront along with Router 3 and a custom domain on GoDaddy. So that's what we did in part 1 and part 2. But even though even this one part, say storage and content delivery, was divided into several parts, just because it was pretty long if I had to do it in one go. But for now, I am going to go ahead with part 3. And then the part 3 is actually user interaction. So I also have divided this into part 3.1 and 3.2. So the first part is actually when a user is adding a like to a story, right? So here you go. If I go with point number 8, right? So a user A taps on the like button for a story that they enjoyed reading. What happens next is in the front end code, the insert like function sends an HTTP post request to the API gateway, passing the story ID in the user ID received from the cognito as parameter. And then so that since it goes to the API gateway, and then number 11, the API gateway receives the request and invokes the Lambda function called insert like that both inserts and increments like. And then step number 12 is the Lambda function receives the story ID and user ID. It updates the DynamoDB table story likes, incrementing the like count for the specified story ID and the user ID as well. And then, so point or step number 13 is story likes table has primary key as the story ID. It stores likes, counts, and users who liked the story. I know it's, I would say, a little bit overwhelming for me to just walk you through the steps. So I'm going to be showing exactly what's happening in each and every step. So I will show you the API gateway. I will show you the Lambda function that I created, the DynamoDB table, and also my app. So I'm going to open the app in here. So I'm just going to quickly build it. So what's I'm going to do also, so I have the API gateway in here already. So what I'm going to do is go to my APIs that I have. So let me see which one was it. So I think so it was story likes API. Yes, so that's the I would say the API that I have. Let me just increase the zoom it in. So this is the API gateway, and also the resources. And then within resources, I have the API endpoints, right? For example, since I was talking about the insert like function in here, right? So I said the insert like function within the code. So if I go back to my code here, this is the insert like API URL. So an API gateway endpoint, which is a combination of the API gateway and then the Lambda function integration. So this API gateway URL is being called in this function. So here you go. This is the private function insert like. So this entire function that you see here. So let me if I just put it a little bit this way so you can see the entire function. So this entire function, as you see, it's for insert like. So anything that you wanted to do from the front end. So you see here, the user A taps on the like button for the story that they enjoyed reading. And number 11, which says the API gateway receives a request and invokes the Lambda function called, no, give me a second. I think so. number 8. In number 9, yeah, here you go. So the front-end code insert like function, which is this one in here, insert like, and also it increments like, send an HTTP post request. So this is the HTTP post request to API gateway, passing the story ID in user ID as parameters, right? So this is the story ID and also the user ID, as you can see in here. So the insert like function on the front end, sending an HTTP post request, passing the story ID and user ID to the API gateway. And then now you might be thinking, what's going to happen next? So I am on my API gateway. So this is the story likes API. And I want to go to my insert like function. So this is my insert like, I would say endpoint, not function. So I'm still on the API gateway. So once I go to Lambda function, that's when it will be a function. So here we go. If I click on the insert like, that's an API gateway endpoint. And I click on the integration request. So that's the Lambda function integration that I have in here. So then you will be seeing it, how this API gateway is being integrated with the function. So here you go, it shows a post request, right? So if you can see this entire URL, at the end of it is actually insert like. So this API endpoint is actually being called in here. So insert like API URL. And as you can see at the top here, insert like API URL is exactly the same URL I have in here, right? So if I just put it a little bit this way so you can see it. So this endpoint and this endpoint is exactly the same. So once again, if I put it this way, coming back here, let me go to my code. So what's happening, as user is going to tap like on a story, and then in the front-end code insert like function down here is being called through an HTTP post request that goes to the API gateway. And then it also, so once it goes to the API gateway, it triggers the insert like Lambda function, which I just showed to you, right? And then the Lambda function is going to, Lambda function receive the store ID, user ID, which I showed you, and then it posts that insert into the DynamoDB. So let me just go to the DynamoDB table quickly as well. So I go to my tables, and inside my table, I go to my action, to my explore table items. I'm going to increase this a little bit so you can see the stories. So those are the stories ID. These are the user IDs, which are then kind of converted to the username that the user actually used. So say for story number 9, I have 8 likes. And then for the user IDs, it's going to go back, and then hopefully you can see it. Story number 9, 8 likes, and those are the users who actually liked the story, right? So once again, if I'm going to do a really quick overview of what it is, a user is going to tap like on a story, right? The insert like function in the Swift code in my front end sends an HTTP post request, passing the story ID in user ID as parameters. And then the API gateway, since it's being integrated with the Lambda function, so it triggers the Lambda function, and then the Lambda function posts the user, so which story that's being liked and who liked the story into the DynamoDB table. So I hope it makes sense. I'm going to stop here, and then the next step that I'm going to be doing is actually creating, I would say, an API gateway, a Lambda function, and then a DynamoDB table. Since I already have those, I would say, I already have the API gateway with all those endpoint URLs or resources. I also have the Lambda function, and I also have the DynamoDB table. So the naming wouldn't be exactly the same. For example, story likes. So if I'm creating another DynamoDB table, it will be called story likes 2. I have an API gateway that's called StoryLikes API. So the next one I will be creating is going to be StoryLikes API 2, right? And also I am going to be sharing this document with you so you can do everything step by step, right? So here you go. So the services used in part 3, DynamoDB table, Lambda function, and API gateway. So I will be going through all those steps with you in a while. But I hope at this point you have a good understanding of what a DynamoDB table is, what a Lambda function is, and what an API gateway is. If you don't have an understanding, it's still okay, right? Because I'm going to do like a really quick, I would say, intro. Again, not going into details. So what is DynamoDB table? It's a fast and flexible NoSQL database that used for all services that needs consistent single-digit millisecond latency. So it's a serverless database. So that's why it's a good idea that I chose it for this thing, because this entire app is serverless. So it's Lambda function, API gateway, DynamoDB, S3, and everything. So they are serverless. I'm just using as much as I need to. So I don't, I would say, spin servers like EC2 instances and things like that they will be running without me needing them. So for example, my functions are running in Lambda. So it's also kind of in the backend, there will be EC2 instances actually running this function. But since it's serverless, so I don't configure any of those things in the backend. So Lambda function just does it for me, right? So for the Lambda function, I also want to show you really quickly the code that I have, because you will not be able to do it without having this code. And then one tip that I wanted to let you know as well, that so writing this code, definitely I wouldn't have been able to do it properly on my own. So I used ChatGPT heavily to create the Lambda function code, or even the front-end code, and also the steps to create my entire backend, right? So again, there will be another video talking about how I created those services with ChatGPT, but for now I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to resume back with you while I'm doing actually creating those resources in the backend. Have a good day. We'll be seeing you soon.